"Sir, be quiet, please." The words trembled out of Naomi Clark's lips, barely above a whisper, but filled with a desperate authority that startled even herself. Her palms pressed against the chest of Alexander Hale, the billionaire whose temper could make seasoned boardroom executives tremble. His body was heavy, slumped in his leather chair, his face pale under the dim golden light of his private study. His lips parted as though to scold her one last time, but his breath caught instead, ragged, shallow, fighting against invisible hands that gripped his lungs. His fingers twitched against the armrest, stubborn even as his body betrayed him. Naomi's heart pounded. She could feel her own knees shaking against the polished oak floor. All her life she had lived quietly, unseen, yet here she was, crouched over a titan of wealth and power, the man who had reduced her to tears with his scorn. And still, she leaned closer, courage dragging her past fear. Her lips touched his. It wasn't a kiss born of affection, but a desperate breath of life, warm and trembling. The taste of salt and bitter whiskey filled her mouth as she exhaled air into his lungs. She prayed silently, fiercely. "Don't let him die. Not like this. Not in my arms." Alexander's chest jerked. A cough tore from his throat, violent and angry, dragging oxygen back into his starving body. His blue eyes shot open, dazed, furious, vulnerable. For the first time in Naomi's presence, he looked afraid. "What did you do?" he rasped, voice hoarse, hand clutching at his heart. Naomi stumbled back, wiping her mouth, eyes wide with panic. You couldn't breathe. I was only trying to—" "Get out," he growled, weak but venomous. The word cut deeper than any blade. Naomi's breath hitched, but she bowed her head, gathering herself, and fled the study. Her shoes squeaked softly on the marble hallway floor as she disappeared into the shadows, leaving Alexander Hale alone with the sound of his faltering heartbeat. Hours earlier, the mansion had been alive with its usual cruel rhythm. The Hale estate was a palace of cold elegance, towering glass windows that reflected the city lights, chandeliers that dripped crystal tears, and staff who moved like ghosts through its polished corridors. Naomi had arrived only 2 weeks before. At 22, she had already worked in more homes than she could count, cleaning after families who never remembered her name. This one was no different, she thought. Except it was worse. Alexander Hale, the master of the house, was nothing like the whispers of glamour the tabloids painted. They called him brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. Up close, Naomi saw the truth. A man whose presence carried both wealth and wrath. She remembered their first encounter as if it were etched into her skin. She had been polishing the grand dining table when his voice sliced through the air. "You missed a spot." She had looked up, startled. Alexander stood at the head of the table, his tailored charcoal suit sharp against his broad frame, his icy blue eyes fixed on her like she was a stain. His jawline was carved, his salt and pepper hair styled with precision, but there was no warmth in him. "I'm sorry, sir," she murmured, wiping again. "Sorry doesn't clean marble," he snapped. From that moment, she became a target for his ire. If she moved too slowly, he scolded. If she moved too quickly, he accused her of being careless. At dinner one night, before a hall of guests, she had poured his wine too close to the rim. The glass overflowed, staining the linen. Alexander's voice boomed across the table. "Do you not know the difference between service and sabotage?" Laughter rippled uncomfortably among his guests. Naomi's cheeks burned, her eyes fixed on the floor. She whispered, read another apology, wishing she could disappear. That humiliation haunted her, replaying in her mind as she worked. But Naomi endured it. She had to. Her mother's medicine wasn't free. Her younger brother's tuition wasn't free, and no one else would hire her with so little experience. Still, she clung to small comforts, the quiet hums she sang to herself when she scrubbed the marble floors, the whispered prayers she repeated before bed, the memory of her mother's gentle smile. And now, hours after that humiliating dinner, she had found herself alone in the study with the same man who had torn her pride apart. Only this time, he wasn't the untouchable billionaire. He was just a man gasping for life, trembling against death's cold hands. Naomi lay awake in her tiny room later that night, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel the ghost of that moment on her lips. The way his eyes had flickered open, not with rage at first, but with fear. A human fear. Why did I do it? She wondered. He would never thank her. He would never look at her as anything more than the maid. And yet, when his breath failed, hers became his. Somewhere in the vast mansion, Alexander Hale sat alone, his hand on his chest, his mind replaying the sensation he couldn't ignore. The press of warm lips, the rush of life returned, the sound of a trembling voice whispering, "Sir, be quiet." It rattled him, it shamed him, and though he would never admit it aloud, it scared him more than death itself. The next morning, the mansion looked the same as always, gleaming, towering, proud, but inside its walls, silence hung heavier than the chandeliers. Naomi moved carefully through the grand hall with her cleaning cart. Her head was lowered, scarf tied neatly, uniform pressed to perfection. But her hands trembled as she gripped the handle. She could still hear his rasping breath, feel the weight of his chest beneath her palms, the desperate press of her lips against his. He told me to get out, she thought bitterly, her heart sinking. That's all I'll ever be to him, a mistake to be dismissed. Her humiliation wasn't private anymore. In the staff kitchen, whispers curled through the air like smoke. "You heard about last night?" murmured Clarissa, the house's head maid, a woman in her 50s with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. "Mr. Hale nearly collapsed. Guess who found him?" Naomi froze near the doorway, pretending to sort silverware. "Who?" another maid asked eagerly. Clarissa smirked. "The new girl, Naomi." Gasps followed, then hushed laughter. "What was she doing in his study at night?" someone whispered. "She's smarter than she looks," another chuckled cruelly. "Maybe she thinks she can climb her way up the ladder, using her mouth." The staff snickered. Naomi's cheeks burned. She clutched the cutlery tighter, forcing herself not to cry. The rumors were twisting the truth into something ugly. No one would believe her if she tried to explain. In this house, she was invisible until there was a mistake to punish. Meanwhile, in his office, Alexander Hale sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at the financial reports on his screen but not seeing them. His chest ached faintly, a reminder of last night. He had told himself it was stress, exhaustion, nothing more. He refused to see a doctor. Doctors were for weak men. But what unsettled him wasn't his body, it was the memory of her. Her face, so close to his, her lips, trembling but fearless as they gave him breath, her voice, soft but firm, commanding him in a way no one ever dared. "Sir, be quiet." He clenched his jaw, pushing the memory away. Gratitude felt like weakness, and Alexander Hale had built his empire on never appearing weak. Still, when Clarissa entered to serve him coffee, he caught the glint in her eye. She bowed too low, smiled too thinly. Rumors had reached her, he realized. Perhaps the whole staff knew. His hand had tightened around the coffee cup. "Tell the staff," he said coldly, "to keep their tongues busy with work, not gossip." "Yes, sir," Clarissa said smoothly, but the corner of her lips twitched with satisfaction. Naomi spent the day scrubbing, polishing, and folding, her body aching, but her mind heavier still. When evening came, she lingered in the garden behind the mansion. The roses there were wild, not perfectly trimmed like everything else in the estate. Their scent reminded her faintly of her mother's tiny porch garden back home. She sank onto a stone bench, pressing her face into her hands. The weight of humiliation pressed against her ribs until it ached. "Why did I do it?" she thought again. "He didn't want saving. He hates me. And now everyone thinks—" A soft cough broke her thoughts. She looked up. Alexander Hale stood a few feet away, his silhouette framed by the fading glow of dusk. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit, just a white shirt with the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His presence still carried power, but something about him seemed disarmed. Naomi scrambled to her feet, bowing her head quickly. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know anyone was here." "Sit," he said. His voice was softer than usual, but Naomi still froze. When she hesitated, he repeated, firmer, "Sit." She lowered herself back onto the bench, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Alexander studied her in silence for a moment. The air between them was tense, filled with unsaid words. Finally he spoke. "About last night." Naomi's breath caught. Her eyes dropped to the ground. "You didn't see anything," he said, his tone sharpening. "You didn't do anything, do you understand?" Her chest tightened, She looked up at him, her hazel eyes wide, hurt flickering across them. "But, sir, you could have—" "I said," he cut in, his blue eyes flashing, "you didn't do anything." Naomi swallowed hard. Her voice was small but steady. "If you want to pretend it never happened, I can't stop you, but I know what I did." The quiet defiance in her words struck him. For a moment, Alexander said nothing. His jaw flexed, his eyes lingering on the trembling strength in her. Then he turned away abruptly, leaving her with only the faint scent of his cologne in the evening air. Naomi sat frozen, her heart aching. The man she had saved couldn't even bring himself to say thank you. And yet, beneath his harsh words, she thought she glimpsed something fleeting, something fragile, a crack in the cold marble mask he wore. But if that crack was real, it was buried quickly under his pride. Inside the mansion, Clarissa's whispers grew bolder. She told anyone who would listen that Naomi was shameless, that she had forced herself on the master. Soon the entire staff eyed Naomi with suspicion. Plates were shoved her way, laundry doubled, corridors she had already cleaned were made her responsibility again. Naomi bore it all in silence. But the humiliation cut deeper each day. And in his high tower office, Alexander Hale, ruthless, brilliant, feared, found himself haunted by the memory of one shy, trembling girl's lips pressed against his, breathing life back into a man who had thought himself untouchable. The air in the Hale mansion thickened with whispers. Naomi could feel it pressing against her skin every time she walked into a room. Conversations halted when she entered, eyes flicked toward her, sharp and accusing. She carried the weight of invisible chains with every step. In the laundry room, one of the younger maids, Anna, finally hissed at her. "You should be ashamed. We work hard here, and you think you can, win favor that way?" Naomi froze, holding a folded bedsheet in her hands. Her lips parted to protest, but no words came. Anna's gaze burned into her until Naomi dropped her eyes to the floor. "I didn't," Naomi whispered, her voice breaking. "That's not what had happened." "Then why won't Mr. Hale say so?" Anna shot back, arms folded. "If you saved him like you claim, wouldn't he defend you?" "No, Naomi. He's silent because he knows what you tried." Tears prickled Naomi's eyes, but she swallowed them down, folding the sheet carefully, as though perfection in her work could erase the stain on her dignity. Upstairs, Alexander Hale stood at his office window, staring out at the city skyline. The man who commanded nations of stockholders, who could buy and sell empires with a signature, found himself distracted by a whisper he couldn't silence. "Sir, be quiet." It haunted him. Every time he tried to dismiss it, the memory returned. Naomi's trembling courage, her lips against his, the desperate gift of air she had given when his own body betrayed him. He had told himself silence was protection, that if he acknowledged her, the rumors would grow, but in truth, his silence was cowardice. He couldn't bring himself to admit, especially not in front of others, that he had needed saving. And so, Naomi suffered. That evening, Naomi was assigned to serve during a private dinner. The guests were important: investors, politicians, people who wore their wealth like armor. The dining hall gleamed with silverware polished to a mirror shine, crystal glasses lined like soldiers, chandeliers spilling light like captured stars. Naomi moved silently, pouring wine, refilling water, clearing plates. Her hazel eyes never lifted higher than the table's edge. She felt Alexander's presence at the head of the table like a flame too close to her skin. One of the guests, a plump man with a cruel laugh, leaned back in his chair and eyed her. "Pretty little thing, isn't she?" he said loudly, pointing at Naomi with his fork. Laughter rippled down the table. Naomi froze, her hand tightening on the wine bottle. Her cheeks burned as she tried to retreat, but the man caught her wrist. "Don't be shy, girl," he chuckled. "Come close." "I don't bite." Naomi's pulse raced. She tugged her hand gently, whispering, "Please, sir." Alexander's voice cut through the laughter. "Let her go." The guest blinked, startled. "What's this, Hale? She's just—" "I said, let her go." The room fell silent. Naomi's wrist slipped free as the man raised his hands defensively, chuckling awkwardly. "Fine, fine. Didn't mean anything by it." Naomi stepped back, trembling, her eyes fixed on the floor. Alexander's gaze swept over the table. His tone was ice. "If my staff is disrespected again in this house, the offender will not be welcomed back. Ever." No one laughed after that. Later, when the guests had gone, Naomi found herself scrubbing the last wine stain from the linen tablecloth. Her hands moved mechanically, but her mind raced. Alexander had defended her. For the first time, he had spoken in her favor. And yet, he hadn't looked at her afterward. He had left the hall as if nothing had happened, his pride locking every door that gratitude might have opened. Naomi whispered to herself as she scrubbed, "I'm still invisible, even when he sees me." But Alexander wasn't untouched by the moment. In the privacy of his study, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, though his hands trembled as he lifted it. He had defended her instinctively, a flash of protectiveness that startled even him. It wasn't about her being staff. It wasn't about image. It was something deeper, something rawer, that clawed at the walls he had built around himself. For the first time in years, Alexander Hale wondered if his power had blinded him not only to others, but to himself. The rumors, however, grew stronger. Clarissa, seizing her chance, whispered to the guests' assistants, the other staff, anyone who would listen. "Did you see how he defended her? She has her claws in him now." By the end of the week, Naomi's name was poison in two. Corridors, trays went missing and she was blamed, work doubled and no one helped her. The mansion itself seemed to turn against her, as though the walls had ears and the floors sneered at her footsteps. And Alexander, though he watched from afar, remained silent. Until the night of the gala. The night of the gala arrived like a storm. The Hale mansion glittered with gold and crystal, every chandelier blazing, every marble surface polished until it blinded the eye. Guests flooded the hall in silk gowns and tailored tuxedos, their laughter echoing against the tall ceilings. It was Alexander Hale's kingdom on full display, the empire he had built, the power he commanded. Naomi moved among them like a shadow. She wore the plain black and white uniform of the staff, but her posture carried the weight of weeks of humiliation. Every step reminded her of the whispers, the sidelong glances, the muttered accusations. Tonight, with the crowd watching, she felt more fragile than ever. Her hands shook as she balanced a silver tray of champagne glasses. She focused on her breath, on keeping her hazel eyes low. But Clarissa had other plans. The head maid glided toward her, her lips painted in a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Naomi," she said sweetly, too loudly for the crowded hall, "stay close to the master tonight, After all, isn't that where you're most comfortable?" A ripple of laughter spread among the staff nearby. Some guests turned their heads curiously, sensing something scandalous in the air. Naomi's heart lurched. I don't know what you mean," Naomi whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the hum of the party. Clarissa's eyes gleamed. "Don't play shy, dear. Everyone knows how you saved Mr. Hale. Isn't that right? With your lips?" The tray in Naomi's hands wobbled. She steadied it quickly, her cheeks burning hot. The words hit her like knives, and laughter from the nearby servants cut deeper than the richest guest's ridicule could. Before she could slip away, Clarissa raised her voice, addressing the crowd around them. "Perhaps we should ask the master himself. Mr. Hale." Alexander Hale turned sharply from the group of investors he had been entertaining. His blue eyes locked on Clarissa first, then Naomi, small, trembling, clutching her tray like a shield. For a moment, silence crashed over the hall. The music faltered, conversations stuttered, all eyes shifted to the billionaire. Alexander's jaw tightened. He had lived his life on control, on never revealing weakness. Admitting what Naomi had done meant admitting that he had needed her, that his own body had failed and hers had saved him. The weight of his pride pressed down like iron. But then he saw her. Naomi's hazel eyes shimmered with unshed tears, her lips pressed together to hold back her humiliation. He saw the way her hands trembled, the way she stood alone against a sea of mockery. And something inside Alexander Hale, the man who had never once bent, broke. He set his glass down slowly, deliberately. Then, with the full force of his voice, he spoke. "She saved my life." The words cut through the hall like thunder. Naomi's head jerked up, her eyes wide. The guests shifted uneasily. The staff froze. Clarissa's smile faltered. Alexander stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "Naomi Clark," he said, his voice firm. "Found me in my study when I was minutes from death. I was too arrogant to call for help, too consumed by pride. She acted when no one else did. She gave me breath when I had none left. Without her courage, I would not be standing here tonight." Gasps rippled across the hall. A few guests exchanged shocked glances. Others stared at Naomi with new, piercing interest. Alexander's eyes burned with something raw as he turned to her. "I humiliated you. I disrespected you. And you still saved me. I owe you my life, Naomi. That is the truth." The hall was silent, every ear straining. Then, slowly, almost unthinkably, Alexander Hale lowered his head. Not much, not deeply, but enough. Enough to say what no billionaire, no titan of industry had ever said before. "I am sorry." The words were soft, but they carried heavier than the chandeliers above. Naomi's lips parted, but no sound came. The tray in her hand slipped slightly, and she quickly set it on the nearest table before it fell. Her heart thundered in her chest. Around them, the crowd stirred. Some guests nodded, impressed by his humility. Others whispered in disbelief. Among the staff, Clarissa's face hardened like stone. But Naomi, shy, trembling Naomi, stood in the middle of it all, her breath shallow, her eyes shimmering. For the first time since she had entered the Hale mansion, she wasn't invisible. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Hale wasn't untouchable. The silence in the gala hall lasted only a heartbeat. Then it broke into a storm of whispers, gasps, and scattered applause. Alexander Hale, cold, ruthless, feared, had apologized, publicly, to a maid. Naomi stood frozen, the words still ringing in her ears. "She saved my life, I am sorry." She felt every pair of eyes on her, some filled with awe, others with scorn. Her chest tightened, she wasn't used to being seen like this. Clarissa, however, could not let the moment pass. She stepped forward, her smile brittle, but her voice sweet. "How noble, sir. Truly. But forgive me. Are we to believe this girl is the only thing standing between life and death for a man such as yourself?" Her words dripped with venom, and murmurs rose again. Some guests smirked, others leaned closer, eager for scandal. Naomi's lips parted, her hazel eyes flicking to Alexander. She didn't know whether to speak or flee. Alexander turned his gaze on Clarissa. His blue eyes sharpened into steel. "Are you questioning my word?" Clarissa's smile faltered, but she held her ground. "Not at all, sir. But surely the method she used was inappropriate for a servant. Some might say she crossed a line." Gasps swept through the hall. Naomi's breath caught, her face flushed hot with shame. Alexander's jaw clenched. His voice dropped into something cold, dangerous. "The only line crossed here is your insolence." Clarissa stiffened. He stepped closer, his presence towering over her. "When I was choking on my pride, when my own body betrayed me, not one of you was there. Not the staff, not the doctors I could have called, not the partners who claimed to respect me. Only her. She risked her dignity to save me. And you dare twist that into filth?" Clarissa's face paled. For the first time in her decades of service, her composure cracked. Alexander turned to the guests, his voice rising so that no corner of the hall missed a word. "If courage embarrasses you, leave my house. If dignity offends you, the door is open. But if you have an ounce of respect left, then remember this girl's name, Naomi Clark. She is worth more than every dollar in this room." The room erupted, not with laughter or ridicule this time, but with applause. Reluctant at first, then building, echoing under the high ceilings. A politician clapped, an investor followed. Soon the sound swallowed the hall. Naomi's chest heaved, her eyes brimming with tears. She stood trembling, her heart so full it hurt. Clarissa bowed her head stiffly, retreating with her pride in tatters. After the gala, the mansion was quieter, but the ripple of what had happened lingered. Guests whispered about Alexander's humility. Some doubted it, others admired it. But one truth remained. Naomi Clark was no longer invisible. As the last glass was cleared, Naomi slipped into the garden, needing air. The roses were bathed in moonlight, their fragrance soft in the night. She pressed her hand to her chest, still overwhelmed. "You should lift your fight today. Is my so monsieur. Our head when people clap for you," a voice said behind her. Naomi startled. She turned to find Alexander standing in the shadows, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable. I didn't know what to do," she admitted softly, her hazel eyes dropping again. He stepped closer. The night air carried his cologne, warm and sharp. "You stood your ground. That was enough." Naomi shook her head. "I didn't stand at all. You did." Her voice trembled. "And now everyone knows. Everyone knows about what I did." Alexander's gaze softened, though his tone remained steady. "Let them know. I won't hide it any more." Her throat tightened. She searched his eyes for mockery, but found only something new, something fragile, raw, gratitude. "You changed me, Naomi," he said quietly. "I don't expect you to understand how deeply. But when I couldn't breathe, you reminded me I was human. No one has done that in years." Her breath caught. Tears threatened, but she held them back. She had spent her life unseen, stepped on, silenced. And now the most powerful man she had ever met was speaking to her as though she mattered. Naomi looked away, whispering, "I only did what was right." Alexander studied her, the corners of his lips twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile but close. Sometimes doing what's right takes more strength than building an empire. For the first time since she'd entered the mansion, Naomi let herself breathe without fear. But somewhere inside, a warning lingered. Power never shifts quietly. And Clarissa, humiliated and bitter, was not finished yet. The days after the gala were unlike anything Naomi had ever known. For the first time, the staff didn't mock her openly. Some avoided her altogether, unable to meet her eyes after the billionaire himself had defended her. A few whispered apologies, too quiet to matter, but the sting of weeks of humiliation still clung to her skin. Alexander, meanwhile, changed. Not in grand gestures. He was still curt, still a man of iron, but in small, startling ways. He no longer barked when she was a moment late with his coffee. He no longer sneered when she hummed softly as she worked. Once, when he passed her in the corridor, he simply said, "Good evening, Naomi." Her name on his lips sent a shiver through her chest. Still, she kept her distance. Pride and fear wove a barrier she dared not cross. But Clarissa simmered. The humiliation of being rebuked publicly burned in her like poison. For 20 years she had been mistress of order in this mansion, her authority unquestioned. Now a shy maid half her age had become the master's shield. Clarissa began her revenge carefully. She planted seeds among the staff. Murmurs that Naomi had bewitched Alexander, that her innocence was a mask. She whispered to guests' assistants, letting the rumors crawl into the city's social circles. And one evening, she stepped into Alexander's office uninvited. "Sir," she began, bowing low, her tone dripping with false humility. "May I speak plainly?" Alexander looked up from his desk, his blue eyes narrowing. Briefly. She clasped her hands, feigning concern. "The girl, Naomi. I worry about her influence. The staff fear she has gained unnatural power over you. People are speaking, sir. They say you've been compromised." Alexander leaned back in his chair, studying her. His silence stretched long, suffocating. Clarissa pressed on. "She could ruin your reputation. All it would take is one suggestion, a scandal. Surely you see the danger." Finally, Alexander spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight like thunder. "The only danger in this house, Clarissa, is you." Her composure cracked. "Sir? I have tolerated your whispers for too long," he continued, standing. His height loomed, his gaze unforgiving. "Naomi saved my life. You tried to destroy hers. If loyalty means anything in this house, it means protecting those who show more courage than you have in 20 years of service." Clarissa paled. "You would dismiss me? After everything I've done?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "Leave your keys. You're finished here." The words struck like a sentence. Clarissa's lips trembled, her eyes glistening with rage and despair. For a moment she seemed on the verge of tears, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I gave you my life." But Alexander's face remained stone. "And you used it to wound the innocent. Go!" With a strangled sound, Clarissa dropped the heavy ring of keys onto his desk. She turned sharply, her footsteps echoing as she stormed out, her pride shattered. That night, Naomi found herself summoned to the study. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, expecting scolding or new orders. Instead, she found Alexander standing by the fireplace, the flames painting shadows across his sharp features. "She's gone," he said without turning. Naomi blinked. "Clarissa?" "Yes." His voice was steady, though his hand gripped the mantle tightly. "She tried to poison this house against you. I should have stopped her sooner. I didn't." Naomi's lips parted, but no words came. Finally, he turned, and for the first time, his pride seemed stripped away. "I was wrong, Naomi. Not just in the study that night. Not just at the gala. From the moment you entered this house, I saw you as less than you are, and I let others treat you the same. I can't erase that. But I can say this. I see you now." Her throat tightened. She had dreamed of being seen, truly seen, but never by him. Never by the man whose voice had once humiliated her before a table of strangers. "Sir," her voice cracked, "I never asked for this." "I know," he said softly. His blue eyes held hers, unwavering. "That's why you deserve it." Naomi's eyes brimmed with tears she couldn't hold back. She lowered her head, pressing her hands together tightly, as if prayer was the only thing keeping her upright. Alexander stepped closer, but not too close. His voice dropped. "You gave me life, Naomi. I don't intend to waste it, not anymore." In that moment, the mansion, once so cold, so cruel, felt warmer than it ever had before. The mansion was quiet, its echoing halls softer now without Clarissa's sharp presence. The servants moved differently, no longer under the weight of her tyranny, though still cautious under Alexander's gaze. But something had shifted. The air was lighter, as if the house itself had exhaled. Naomi, however, couldn't rest. The moment in the study haunted her. His words, "I see you now," rang through her chest like church bells. She told herself it meant nothing, that men like him never truly changed, that her heart was too fragile to believe. But at night, lying on her narrow bed, she touched her lips, remembering the kiss that had saved his life. And she wondered, what had she really awakened in him? Days later, Alexander called the staff to the grand hall. Naomi lingered in the back, trying to make herself small, but he spotted her immediately. His voice carried across the marble floor. "Every one of you has seen what this house became under fear. You watched cruelty and said nothing. So did I." His eyes swept the crowd, piercing, unrelenting. "But that ends now. This house will not be ruled by fear again. Not by Clarissa. Not by me." The staff exchanged stunned glances. Never had Alexander Whitford spoken like this. He continued, his tone firm but quiet. "I nearly died on this floor because I let arrogance blind me, and the one person I dismissed as least among you, Naomi, is the one who saved me. With courage. With mercy." All eyes turned to her. Naomi's face burned. She wanted to vanish into the walls, but Alexander's gaze held her steady, as if daring her to believe in herself. "She will not be mocked in my house again," he said, his voice hardening. "If anyone cannot respect her, leave now." The silence was profound. Not a soul moved. Naomi's chest heaved with a quiet sob she quickly smothered. She had never felt smaller, yet never so seen. That evening, Naomi stood outside the garden, the night air cool against her skin. She had avoided him all day, unsure of what to say after his speech. But his footsteps soon crunched softly against the gravel path. "You should be angry with me," he said quietly, stopping beside her. Naomi looked down, her hands clasped. "I was. And now?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Now, I don't know what to feel." He studied her in the starlight. "You don't owe me forgiveness. I won't ask for it. But I would ask for a chance to prove I can be more than the man I've been." Naomi's breath trembled. "Why me?" "Because you're the only one who ever told me the truth," he murmured. "You were the only one who wasn't afraid to stop me, even if it cost you everything." Her eyes met his then, and for the first time she saw not a ruthless tycoon, but a man stripped bare of his pride, speaking as if his soul itself depended on her answer. Naomi's lips trembled. "I'm just a maid." His jaw softened and his voice lowered, as though the words were meant for her alone. "You are the reason I'm alive. And to me, that means you're everything." The stars blurred as tears filled her eyes. She shook her head, overcome, and whispered, "Sir, be quiet." And then, just as she had in the study, she kissed him. Not in fear this time, not to save his life, but to give him her truth. A soft, trembling kiss that carried years of silence, pain, and hope. Alexander's hands hovered near her face, afraid to touch, as though she were something sacred. When she pulled back, both of them were breathless. He closed his eyes, his voice breaking. "Naomi, I don't deserve this." "Maybe not," she whispered. "But sometimes grace isn't about deserving." In the days that followed, the mansion changed.